what is lipedema? We thought this question was one we needed to address early on for our listeners that may only now be learning about the disease or those that just want to dig deeper. When we started brainstorming this episode and guests that could lend their expertise to answering this question, there was only one that stood out to me. So I reached out to her and pleaded my case, and she so graciously agreed to join us.
She is the founder and CEO of the Lipedema Project and Lipedema Simplified. She is the producer and director of the documentary The Disease They Call Fat and co-author of the book Lipedema, A Disease They Call Fat, an overview for clinicians. She is the reason that Sean and myself and so many others know about this disease and therefore are able to have a better quality of life and health. She is Dr. Cathere Seo, and we are so grateful to have her here with us today.
Yes, Dr. Seo, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Ashley and Sean, and please call me Catherine.
Okay. Okay, great. Well, can we start by having you tell us just a little bit about yourself and your own journey with lipedema? When do you think you first developed it?
Oh, when I was pre-puberty, just before. I mean, literally, I think the first time that I had inklings of it, I was 8 or 9 years old, and I had an early puberty. So, but I didn't know it until I was in my 60s. So, you know, a lifetime of dealing with what I now know is lipedema.
Wow. What were some of the symptoms that you had early in life?
Oh, you know, column legs, a deposition of fat that was bottom heavy, you know, weight gain at puberty that just was not explainable, even though I also, you know, I have lived my life with food issues and weight issues. So it's not just the lipedema, but that was what was triggering it all. And, you know, the brief version of my story is I hit perimenopause. So, as I said, I've had food issues and consider myself a compulsive eater and went into Overeaters Anonymous in the 1980s. And lost and maintained a 140-pound weight loss for almost 27 years.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I was pretty impressed.
You should be.
Yeah.
So what happened was when I hit perimenopause, now I loved my food plan. I was on a very restrictive in some ways, low carbohydrate plan, and because I had lost so much weight and I had maintained it for so long, I slowly was gaining weight. And when I hit my late 50s, I'm 74 now, so it was some years ago. So I started to gain weight, and nothing I was doing warranted it. I was eating really well. I'd been eating the same way I had been eating for years and years. I was exercising. I was active.
Yeah.
So through that period, I went to my primary care, and I'm like, something's wrong. I have uncontrollable swelling. My legs were swelling significantly. I know you ladies know this. I was having pain. The bruising, I always attributed to that I was bumping into things and I didn't remember. You know, all of the things that we talk about. Anyway, the weight gain was making me absolutely crazy. I'm like, how can I be gaining weight when I'm eating so well? And I wrote everything down. I mean, I was, I measured everything. Anyway, and it was through that whole process I ended up needing some surgeries in my perimenopausal phase, and the combination of what was happening just was overwhelming, and I ended up in a very significant health crisis where it looked like I was going to lose my mobility and I was going to end up in a wheelchair. I didn't think that was a good option.
No.
Wow.
No, I don't think so. And I've heard you, I've watched your documentary, and I've heard you even talk about how you took a leave of absence from work, from kind of life, and you were exercising for hours a day and seeing no result. Is that right?
Yeah, that was because that's what they were doing on The Biggest Loser.
Yes. Yep.
So true.
Yep.
They were doing that on The Biggest Loser. I'll never forget the expression on Dr. Carmody's face when I brought him in pictures from a 5K that I did. I'm like, I had never done a 5K in my life, but I was upping everything. But
Yeah.
I believe, I'm grateful. Let me say, I feel that I was blessed because I had a doctor who was very kind, knowledgeable, generous, was willing to walk the journey with me, and we were able to figure out that lipedema. No
Yeah.
one at that point, there was one doctor in all of the U.S. that even knew about it, and she wasn't focused on it. She was focused on other fat disorders.
Yeah.
And she ended up getting more focused. Dr. Herbst, she ended up becoming more focused on lipedema, but at the time, she was focused on Derkum's disease.
Yes.
And, yeah.
Well, and you really are a pioneer in the whole lipedema world, and learning about it. You came into an understanding of it, like you say, at a time when not very many people knew about it at all. It was a huge question mark, but you knew that something was wrong. So tell us, if you can, briefly about your journey to discover what this mystery condition was.
Oh, I was losing my mobility. I was in constant pain. I couldn't sleep through the night because the pain was overwhelming. Part of it was that the surgeries had, given me further complications, and I ended up with lymphedema.
Hmm.
So I remember sitting and sobbing. I mean, like Oprah talks about the ugly cry, just
Yes.
sobbing and sobbing and sobbing and trying to figure it out. And my surgeon fired me. He said I was asking too many questions, and he didn't want to see me anymore. And I literally didn't know what to do. But this was like when you have an aha moment. This was my aha moment where I just finally got that they didn't know. It wasn't that they didn't want to help. It's like they didn't know, and they couldn't say, "We don't know." That's
Right.
not in
Right.
their lexicon. Most of them don't have that vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember thinking that if I took that, what I said to myself was, if if I'm if anyone's going to find the answers, it's got to be me. It's my body. It's my rest of my life. If there's an answer to find, I have to find it. I'm a professor. I'm a researcher. I love, looking for answers that are not visible, that are complex. So I said, this is the one where it matters because it's your life.
Right.
And so
Right.
what ended up happening is I said to myself, all I have to do is take one step, one small micro step. And that led me around the world to meeting some of the most fascinating people, patients and doctors and researchers and advocates. And I keep taking the next step.
Yeah, I love that. Oh my
It's so
goodness.
good.
I've even found myself saying that. Can you clarify very quickly the surgeries that you're talking about before you found out that what you had was lipedema? You're not talking about lipedema surgeries. What kind of surgeries are you talking about?
I had developed a very difficult cystic condition that was impeding on my mobility. And so I had to have excisions I thought it was a good idea when I was having these cysts excised that I would have a thigh lift because I had excessive redundancy. So I ended up having a thigh lift and what's called a peniculectomy. You know, the apron when you lose a lot of weight. So I had a couple of not cosmetic, reconstructive surgeries
Gotcha.
along the way. I probably wouldn't have had it if I didn't have something pushing me to do it, which was, I figured I'm under the knife. Why don't I do this?
Yeah.
Not a good decision.
And that triggered the lymphedema and that's really interesting. Our next guest on the show, I think she's probably around 40, and she lost over 200 pounds and just recently had a thigh lift and or a tummy tuck and some other things, and that's exactly the same story with her. It triggered her lymphedema and lipedema.
Wow.
So that's really interesting.
That is. And at the time, I didn't have a diagnosis of lipedema. I had no idea what it was. I thought that was what's called skin redundancy is what they call it. It's like when you've lost a lot of weight and you're left with the flappy skin.
Yeah.
Right.
And at the time, I want to say I was in my late 50s. And again, if it wasn't that I had developed this perimenopausal condition, or what I think was perimenopausal, I now think it could have been a lymphatic disorder. But anyway, I ended up, going in that direction, which led me here. So who knows? They say everything happens for a reason.
Yes.
If
So how do you explain what lipedema is to someone that's never heard of it before?
So I usually say that it's a disproportionate distribution of fat, and that the fat is not only a fat disorder, but a lymphatic and a metabolic disorder, and that it's multi-system. That's very complex. If it was simple, we would have an answer, and it's not simple. But that there are a number of symptoms that seem to be universal in most of us that have it, which is the distribution of fat, which tends to go to the lower body and the upper arms, which tends to be pain. And it depends. Some of us, it's like burning. Some of it's like shads of glass going through your flesh. It just depends on our bodies and our comorbidities and our history. Bruising, because of the fragility of the capillaries. So there's bruising that oftentimes, people will look and they say, how did I get a black and blue? I don't remember. I went to my massage therapist, it's going back some time, and she said, what happened? I said, I don't know what happened. And I looked and I had like a black and blue.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you ladies know this. The thing about it that I emphasize whenever I'm, really focusing on lipedema as an entity is that it's progressive. And the thing is, there's so many women that, let me step back and say, its progressive nature affects those of us who are, like I'm in my 70s, so there's a whole group of us who found out about it in our late 50s, early 60s, 70s, 80s.
Yeah.
We have women in the community. And I just want to say kudos to you, because you ladies are young. There's enough time to stop the progression. When I started, it wasn't known in your generation, and it's growing. And the awareness of it is making a difference.
Well, thank you. Tell us about your research and your mission in bringing awareness to this disease.
So when I started, I was looking for answers for me. Really. I just wanted to know what to do and what I could do and how I could do it. When I started to travel, my first trip was to the UK. There was a group of ladies who were looking at lipedema, and they invited me to join them in the UK. First of all, I thought that was crazy. Second of all, I'm like, how can I go to England for the weekend? At that point, that wasn't, I
Yeah.
mean, that wasn't what I was doing. But it answers the question, because when I walked in, and I think I see this very much in the work that you, Ashley, and you, Sean, are doing, there's a sense of, oh, someone like me.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
like a tale. It's
Yes.
like, oh my God, I'm not alone. I'm not alone. I'm not crazy. I thought I was crazy. I thought it was me. You know, there's this sense of connection and understanding
Yeah.
and knowledge. It's like I learned so much in the weekend that I went to the UK. And what ended up happening is I realized that I wasn't alone, that there were literally millions of women who have the disorder, and that nobody knew. And all I needed to do was start making friends. That's really what I did, is I
Yeah.
started to make friends. And I started to be able to say, gee, this happened to me. What happened to you? And listen. And I feel like, you know, without, at that point, without saying, you know, okay, let's have a community where what we're doing is talking about this. But Nola had started a Facebook group in Australia. Um, Michelle had started one in the UK. Eventually, Sarah started one in the US. And these groups started to grow. And there were women all throughout Europe, all South Africa. We have a whole group in South Africa. And what ended up happening is we ended up helping one another. And
Yeah.
I think that I consider my superpower is information.
Yes.
I'm an information maven. I mean, I'm a researcher. I'm a professor. I love all of that. And so what I did is I put up websites, and I just put up a lot of information. I created the very first research document that Lipedema Project published. And so now we have extensive access to all research on lymphedema and lipedema. And the Lipedema Project grew. You know, I reached points that it looked like there was a dead end. You know, there was no way to go forward. And one of those points, Dr. Mark Smith stepped in and funded us and lipedema, and we created the Lipedema Project, the focus of which is research and awareness raising. So a lot of the early work was done by the Lipedema Project with the support of some folks in the medical community, which is what made a difference. And so that's a long way of saying, in the Lipedema Project, we actually have a vision statement, which is to be the voice of lipedema for those who, you know, need that support.
Well, and the Lipedema Project is how I stumbled across lipedema on Facebook. Just saw someone mention the word and saw my body type, and then when I started looking more into it, the Lipedema Project is where I went, and that's how I ended up finding a doctor to diagnose me, and I've given that website out to so many, I think Ashley too.
Yep.
And so it's helped so many people. So I'm really grateful for that. So you are definitely raising the awareness, that's for sure. So what about when women discover, like, okay, I think this might be what I have, like this sounds like me. How do you advise someone who's just now learned about lipedema and they're needing to know what their next steps are?
We do a lot of education. So I hear from hundreds of women. I get emails, texts, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, you know, so I hear from women literally all around the world, and their first question is, what do I do next? And a lot of them say, who can I go to? There's an expectation that a doctor's going to be able to solve the problems.
Yeah.
And that's just not true.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things I say again and again and again, unfortunately, what you can get is a diagnosis, and that's good. You want to have a diagnosis. You want to know if it is or it isn't. The next step is yours. You need to empower yourself. You need to educate yourself. You need to learn, number one, what's possible. Number two, what your body responds to. And so that's our work. What we do is we have support groups. We have all sorts of free webinars. We have one coming up. What's today? Wednesday? Thursday. We have one coming up tomorrow. So we do free webinars, often a couple a month. And we have a membership group for those who want to do much more focused work. So we have online classes. We have one coming up that's called Living Well with Lipedema. We have Quick Start Keto. We have conservative measures. We've had on educating about surgical options, though we tend to be more on the conservative side. What can you do today? What can you do moment to moment to moment to make a difference?
In all of your research, and I know you've worked with many doctors, you know many of the surgeons that treat lipedema. Did you ever consider having lipedema surgery?
I did.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I had 2 procedures. So it's one of the reasons that I say to people, do your homework.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 liposuctions in Europe. That's
Okay.
because I was working with the doctors in Europe, and I did not have. I'm trying to think of how to say this. I did not have the best experience. I ended up, when I got home, in the hospital in the emergency room and having some very severe complications.
Oh wow, I didn't realize that.
Well, I had 2 doctors tell me, because you asked me, I had 2 doctors, both of whom I highly, highly, highly respected, tell me I was not a candidate for surgery for various reasons. And I overrode them.
Okay.
And went to someone who said, okay, we'll give it a try.
Oh, goodness.
So that's why I always tell people, please do your homework. I know, Sean, that you've done a lot of your homework for your surgery. So I'm really excited to follow your journey and see how it goes.
Yes, thank you so
Yeah.
much. Yeah.
In the few minutes that we have left, is there anything new in the lipedema world? Anything new in the research that you can share, or anything just that you find interesting that you want to highlight today?
Such a great question. I'm excited beyond belief, but I can't tell you about it yet.
Oh my goodness!
We're in the midst of a project that we've been working on for over 2 years. That's about ready to happen in the world. So
Okay.
I promise you, when it happens, I'd be happy to come back and talk with you more at length.
We would love that. We would absolutely love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be a cure one day?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We were just having this conversation. We started 10 or 12 years ago with this, and where we've come in 10 or 12 years because of the grassroots efforts and the responsiveness of some in the healthcare system. And so some of the top researchers in this field are getting more involved, and that's incredible. So I think that it's possible, I think it's probable, and I think we have a lot of momentum to have it move in that direction.
That is so exciting.
Yes, very encouraging.
What advice can you give? You know, Sean and I, we met on Instagram, and this whole podcast and all of this, you know, a year ago, I did not know what lipedema was. So this has been a bit of a wild ride for sure. But what advice can you give us? Can you give anyone listening that has a heart to raise awareness, to be part of that grassroots movement? What would you say, you know, what should we do? How can we help?
I can share with you what worked for me.
Okay.
And what worked for me is to listen. Number one, listen to my body. And number two, ask the questions and listen to each other. I found that grew more than anything. You know, every single thing that I've done, it's come from a conversation with someone in the community that said, "Oh, here's a good idea," and together, I mean, basically what you're doing, you two are working together to raise awareness, and the more of us that do that, the more awareness there will be, and the more people that we reach. You guys, you're both moms. You both have like a ton of kids.
That's true too.
You know, you're reaching an audience. You know, you're both young. You're youngins. You know, so you're reaching a very particular audience that are, you know, come to you. So there you're raising awareness. You know, we were talking the other day, you know, my staff, except Siobhan's come in now and she's in her 20s. But the others of us are in our 60s and 70s. And that's where we started, because that's who we are. But it's spreading and it's becoming more and more exciting. Imagine one of our people one of our ladies that we're working with. She's doing some work with us in a professional capacity. She just took her daughter to the pediatrician. Her daughter's 11 and on the edge of puberty. And, you know, she's most probably has lipedema. And so we were in the conversation about, you know, what can we do? How do we reach that population?
Yes, yes.
Just starting where you can intervene in it. And that's some of what we're working on now.
Okay.
Very exciting,
That's
especially
so
for those of us
exciting.
with daughters, right? So I love this, and I attended one of your webinars recently that was just full, I mean, several days worth, chock full of great information and keynote speakers. So for our listeners that want to find you and plug in, can you tell everyone where they can find you?
Come to lipedema-simplified.org, which is, we have two factions, or two entities. Lipedema Simplified is where we teach and where we have the membership groups and the free webinars. Lipedema Project is where we're doing it's a not-for-profit, and we do research and we do publications and a number of other things. So either one of those websites, which I hope you'll put with so people can click the link. And you can always email me directly, Catherine at lipedema-simplified.org. I get lots of emails, but I'm really good at answering them.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yes.
Well, Catherine, before you go, what is the one thing that you would say to our listeners?
Love yourself. You are so worthy. And so many of us have such deep fat phobia and see ourselves as less than, because that's what the culture does to us. So the very first thing you need to do is love yourself enough to be willing to take care of yourself and to take the first step in your own journey.
I love that.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Catherine, for joining us today. So grateful for your time.
Oh, thank you so much. And thank you for the work you're doing. Any way I can support you, I'm one of your fans.
Oh, thank
Thank
you.
you so
Listen,
much.
I think that makes our whole day to hear that from you. That's such an honor. So
It
thank
does.
you.
Yes. All right. Talk soon.